Yes, I'm here. What do you want me to do? I can't see the slate. Dark Shadows, number 1. VTR 613, air date 6/27/66. Take 3.
Dark Shadows, BTR 5/26/69, air 6/2/69.
Dark Shadows, BTR 2767 for air 21467. Number 32, DRK 67.
The night wind murmurs through the ancient trees surrounding Collinwood, sounding like hushed voices speaking in whispers, voices from the past, whispering from a void that transcends time. On this night, the voices may be heard most clearly in the forest surrounding a gloomy, forbidding old house. For there is one in that house who would transcend time this night, who would cause the past to merge with the present, who would cause the land of the living to merge with the land of the dead.
I had a dream of, which turned out to be the very beginning of the first episode, of a girl on a train reading a letter. And I could almost hear the voiceover, how she was being hired as a governess. And the dream ended when she got off the train. The train pulled away and left her standing in this dark, deserted station. And when I woke up in the morning and took a shower, and I thought it was a terrible idea. My wife happened to be awake at the time, and I said, I had an idea last night that I thought was the bestest dream. I said, oh, it's so awful. Well, she said, tell me about it. And I told her about it. And she said, well, I think that's a terrific idea. I said, you do? She said, yeah. No, I said, I think so, huh? Oh, yeah, I thought it was a great idea. Just so happened I had a lunch date that day with a guy named Lenny Goldberg, who was, at that time, had a daytime at ABC. And we were developing, he wanted me to develop a daytime show for him. In those days, we all kind of started out together. And I was working on a daytime idea, and I happened to tell him about this. I said, I had the greatest idea for a nighttime show. And he said, let's do that in the daytime. And I said, no, it's not a daytime show, it's a nighttime show. No, he said, let's forget the other one we're talking about. Let's do this one. I said, I don't want to do this. And we argued about it for about 10 minutes. I said, what kind of an order could you give me? He's 13 weeks. I said, not enough. I need 26. He said, you got it. Shook hands. That's how it happened.
I've never been in such a big house before, Mrs. Stoddard. How many rooms do you have?
There are 40, but they're not all in use. It's quite cold. I put on some tea. Would you like to wait in the drawing room?
Thank you. 40 rooms? You must need an awful lot of people to help you take care of it.
We have one man for the heavy work, Miss Winters. We do the rest ourselves.
I think that a lot of us, certainly myself at the head of the list, were terrified. A lot of us were very nearsighted and couldn't see the teleprompter. I'd never done television before, and it was pretty scary because we didn't have enough rehearsal time and really to memorize the lines, and there were changes. And as I say, I never could see the prompter. So I wore this little bracelet with the St. Christopher medal on it, and if you look, I was always sort of clutching it for good luck to try and get me through the scenes, because, and I think that may have been one of the interesting elements of Dark Shadows, was all of our terror, those of us who were nearsighted, that I think added an element of tension to the show that might not have otherwise been there.
In a way, it made you fearless, because no actor likes to be a safe actor. And with shows like that, with so much drama and so on, you really had to play full out. And so we turned into very brave people because we just did it.
In 1966, on January 14th, I went to 555 Madison and read what seemed to me an extremely peculiar script. There I met Bob Costello and Dan Curtis, and it seemed to be a soap opera, but it was vaguely Jane Eyre-ish. It was sort of gothic in tone and very kind of dark and mysterious and mystical, but fascinating because nothing was like that in those days, particularly in daytime television. On April the 11th, I went to read again for them, and I read for Victoria. I was submitted for Vicki Winters. Well, I thought this was a nice role. She was a little on the sweet side, and of all things I am, sweet is probably not too high on my list. But I read, and I enjoyed it, and they called me back, I think on the 2nd of May, to read for Carolyn. And I looked at Carolyn, and I thought, whoa, this is more like it. She's got too much money. She's got too much freedom. She's got too much hair. She's me. So this, I felt, was somewhat more successful. I did one more test for them, and then I began in mid-June of 1966. I went to rehearsal on the 13th of June, and the act was not quite together at that time, so they were still shooting that day's script. I was there for rehearsal for the next day, which was day number 2 of Dark Shadows. So I went to the studio, ABC over on 66th Street. I walked in and saw what I thought was a magnificent set by any definition. Through a Gothic window of stained glass, which was somewhat open, was one of the most beautiful women I had ever seen in my life, with dark hair, gorgeous skin, emerald green eyes, and standing, looking out the window over her shoulder, was a gorgeous, elegant, blonde gentleman. Well, this turned out to be my family for the next 5 years. This was, of course, Dear Joan and Louis Edmonds, my mother, and my uncle for the next 5 years.
Not planning to jump, are you? You wouldn't be the first to know.
You're Roger Collins, aren't you?
Correct. Brother of Elizabeth, father of David, and terribly sorry if I startled you.
I'm getting used to surprises, Mr. Collins.
Oh, we're quite a strange crew, Miss Winters. I wasn't aware of even the mystique of Dark Shadows while we were making it. When the last episode was over, and I was in the last episode, I hit the pavement and started thinking, if not looking for another job. But then in time, future time, I began to get tapes of the show from fans. And to play them in your own living room so many years later, and to see how good some of them were, made me sit back and say, well, no wonder there's sort of a cult about this thing, if that's the word. And now, then I began to see, yes, it's it warrants this attention, and it's justified, because there's some awfully good work went into those 5 years. It was clouded in fun and a lot of laughter that we had to take with us, otherwise we couldn't get through the day, because there's a certain pressure. Every day in television, daytime television, is opening night. You've barely forgotten your day's lines the day before when you're doing the new one for that day. Well, at any rate, I was surprised and flattered, I think, and proud, I think, to be a part of a company that has such longevity. Well, it's so important that I leave my labors at the plant hurry home.
The police want to question you.
At the end of the 6 months, it was ready to go off the air because I didn't have any supernatural. Everything was talked about. You know, in mostly Gothic novels, you read about locked rooms and sounds, and you never see anything. So this is the way we were doing it. And the show was going down the tubes, and my kids said to me, why don't you at least make it scary? And little kids, I said, why not? So I stuck a ghost on the show just before the end of the 6 months. And the moment that happened, the ratings started to come up. And then we did another story about the mother returning to take the kid into the fire. It's the Phoenix story with Laura, some crazy idea. And the ratings went higher. And it was right after that that I said, let's see how far we can go with this thing. And that's when the vampire happened.
They didn't want just a monster. They wanted something that would be more lasting. With possibilities, you know. I mean, I was vulnerable. I was in love. I was a fiend. I was just everything in the book. It was a very fascinating character, as it turned out. After I got over my own hang-ups about, you see, I'm a slow study, and I really don't belong in that kind of world. And I was a very nervous vampire, a very nervous actor. I think what made the part work for me is that Barnabas also was a very nervous character. If you accept the premise, he comes out of his coffin, having been in it for 150 years or whatever, and he comes out into this new world and has to tell a lie instantly that he was the great-grandson of this portrait, where in fact he's the same guy. I mean, it's a pretty way-out premise, but that was the premise of the whole story. So he was a very nervous person, and as he adjusted and got his act together, so I, as an actor, got adjusted to television and cameras, which I was a little nervous about at the time. But once I got over that, so Barnabas, meanwhile, so the two of us kind of went along together, and that's probably why people maybe identified me as the vampire. And with all due respect to this idea of fans being, indulging themselves in this kind of thing, they had good cause maybe here, more than I ever believed, because I thought I was perfectly dreadful, frankly, at the beginning of this series. But when I saw certain things I did when it played on the air, it was kind of surprising to me. There was something eerie, and it was simply because I was so nervous.
I was a Collins. Why didn't you protect me? Where were you when I was turned into something that even my own father loathed? If his ghost is here with yours, tell him I've come home. I claim this house as mine. And whatever power you or he may have is ended. I am free now and alive. Chains with which he bound me are broken. And I've returned to live the life I never had. Whatever that may turn out to be.
I had no idea that they were going to go into vampires and things like that until they started the thing, And then John and I, Carlin, we were impossible together, that's all. He was always trying to imitate my brogue. Every time I said, Willie, he'd say, Willie back,
Give it to me! Just set of old keys. Oh, well then you won't object to handing it over. If you don't feel like it.
Willie, I'll count 5.
And then I'll tell Mrs. Stoddard I found that pin.
You can put a cast together and then sparks happen or they don't happen, and
script and cast naturally, and that was the deal. And in the original, it worked. That's all. It worked much of the time, and people were, seemed to hit off each other, and good relationships, and whatever, and just a complete whole new idea. That kind of a show. Who the hell ever heard of putting on a Gothic soap opera in the middle of the afternoon? They did it. It worked.
I think when the show really went out into the ether, I thought that was great because, as I said earlier, I think that it fed people's imagination, and there was a hunger for that sort of thing, and I think that's important. As weird as it was, I think that's very good for people to stretch their imaginations and not be smug the way certain television shows could pander to a certain smugness that the other daytime shows at that time did. I think it eventually, when I left the show and I was pregnant and I was watching the show, I couldn't figure it out, even though I'd been on it all the time. It was pretty far out. But at the same time, there was never a dull moment.
Mr. and Mrs. Joshua Collins request the pleasure of your company on the 20th day of December in the year of our Lord, 1795.
That's impossible.
Did you say something, child?
There was another series that came on the same year that Dark Shadows did, and that was Star Trek. And it's always been my feeling that Gene Roddenberry set his stories in the future, but they were the same kinds of parables and universal tales of morality that just have a universal appeal. Dan Curtis took those same stories, and he set them in the past.
Well, many stories I just ripped right off out of the classics. The Quentin story is obviously my version of Turn of the Screw, which really has nothing to do with Turn of the Screw, but that's basically where I got the idea for that. The vampire thing is nothing other than I had decided to see how far we could go with the Spooko. And I figure if we can get away with a vampire, we can do anything, So I'll put him on and we'll kill him off very shortly, and let's just see how far we can go. I mean, no one in the world ever thought that the vampire was going to become a major star. Then I had to figure out a way to perpetuate the story, so suddenly you became a reluctant vampire. That's where that idea came from. How am I going to make a vampire a star? Well, I got to have him really feeling awful about what he does, and maybe people will feel sorry for him.
You must not say you saw me.
Barnabas! You aren't Barnabas! You aren't!
I am.
No!
Sarah! Sarah! Oh, no.
It was my first professional job, and I got a charge account at Saks and got an apartment in New York, thought, this is it. And suddenly she died. And I was without a job, and Dan Curtis called me in and said, we're so sorry, but Angelique, and I went, oh, no. But luckily, she turned out to be a very popular character, and he used to call, Barnabas and Angelique were his big guns, and whenever the ratings went down, that's what he'd do. He'd move us back into the story. So after a couple of years, we were on the show the last day.
Barnabas, your love would change me. Your love could make me anything you wanted me to be.
I hate to be ungallant, but looking at you, I see nothing but the misery that you've caused, the madness, the deaths.
And what do you see when you look in the mirror? But I forgot. You see nothing. So you are spared your conscience.
No! I am not spared that.
You blame me still.
Who put the curse on me?
For a reason.
Because I could not love you.
Well, perhaps this time you will learn to love me. Yes, we're both strangers here, in a foreign century. And if you do, I can help you.
It's a great part. Anyone who gets to play it has a wonderful time. It took me a while. I wanted to be the heroine. I wanted to suffer and cry. But after about 2 years, I finally realized I had the choice role, and I began to really relish it. It's a lot of fun to be mean and realize that every time you decide to torture someone and make their lives miserable, people out there go, oh no, no, what is she going to do next? It's a lot of fun.
Basic to all soap operas is the same thing that's basic to the great plays, to fairy tales. There's royalty. Of course, in our country, we don't have royalty, so it's the rich and the powerful. And that's who people are interested in. And Collinwood, the Collins family, up the big mansion up on the hill, that's just like the king and queen and the royalty. And of course, you know, Dracula came along. It was Count Dracula. And when Barnabas came, he was, you know, from a time, he wasn't just they're not just ordinary folks. The ordinary folks interact with them, but they're always, all soap operas that you look at have the rich and powerful family.
It's a romantic fantasy. It's not really a horror film. People ask me, you know, how do I like doing horror? That's not what it is. It's got scary elements, but it's more a fantasy. It's a romantic fantasy. It's a strange kind of a dreamlike, unique thing. And that's why no one could ever copy it. It was a very enchanting quality to it. It's a very tough show to do.
The writers were wonderful because they spared us nothing. They thought of wonderful ideas, and it was up to us to execute them. And the challenge of doing that was unbelievable both for us and for the cast, because the cast had to be part of it. If there was a hand, an unseen, a disembodied hand following an actor or an actress, he or she had to know just how to turn. It was a terrific kind of discipline that had to be observed. And then we would have to think of ideas to carry out these actions that were physical ideas. And we just learned to be a group. We could have 2-hour production meetings figuring out how to do this stuff, and everybody would throw ideas into the pot. For example, the writer said, well, we're going to be in a graveyard, and suddenly a pair of hands will shoot up from the earth. And we knew that we could cover actors with dirt, but somebody said, but how do they breathe? And the producer, Bob Costello, said, well, we'll give them a little straw and put it in their mouth, they'll breathe. And by God, those actors, they obediently took their lives in their hands, were covered with dirt, and breathed. And there was one time when Jonathan was supposed to step out of his body with the I Ching, and then, you know, go into the past or something. And we tried to figure out how to do that. And what we figured out was that I would do Jonathan and then do a second shot where he rose out of his body. Then I asked the designer, Cy Tomashoff, to do a series of doors, just doors. And as he opened one door, you'd see another. And it looked like it was endless. And it was fun to think of those ideas because you were breaking new territory all the time. And of course, working with the cast, they were an unusual group of people, I think, really unusual. I find that they were just as dramatic in their own persona as the characters they played, so that every rehearsal was like an adventure. You know, it was just wonderful. And they all were fun to work with. They were, I don't know, they were special. And they really were, and I think that was part of the charm, too, that there wasn't really an ordinary person in the whole cast.
I think that it was the most incredibly sincere group of people, sincere in the way they played the role. We were desperate to be playing something that was so different from anything that was on at that time or even now. We were passionate about our roles, because when we eat lunch or eat sandwiches between rehearsals and blockings and all these things, we would still be in character. I never left the character until I walked through the door to the street. We loved each other, we loved the parts, we loved the directors, we adored the producer. It was a very happy, you know, that's what makes for good things, when everybody's very happy. Get great stuff sometimes.
I loved all my characters on Dark Shadows. I had played, by the time the show went off the air, 8 characters, which, by the way, was for me the most rewarding aspect of the show. It was rather like a television repertory group. And I've always basically considered myself a character actress, which I think is why I knew instantly I was wrong for Victoria. But all of them were wonderful fun.
Oh, Nathan, there's a curse on Collinwood and everyone who lives there.
Millicent.
There is. It frightens me so.
More than I frighten you?
Don't joke, please. I'm so frightened for us. everyone at Collinwood who has dared to fall in love. Josette, Barnabas, even Angelique, they've all been so miserable. Why?
There were humorous things that happened, I suppose, but you know, the work was so intense. I mean, you know, there were only 5 actors for the most part on each episode, and we all had a tremendous amount of dialogue to learn, especially when you had to do incantations, and those you know, those were difficult to memorize.
Lead her pure, free, blameless. Depart from her, ye cursed demons, into the everlasting fire which burns all evil and leaves only the ashes of what good she once possessed. Devils, be humbled. Shrink in fear at the dark night you must shortly see.
It was all but live. It was live tape. If you've watched the old shows, you see that we don't cover many of the mistakes. They just hang out there. So it was incumbent on you not to make any, and it was very difficult. It was hard work, and a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. It was a bath of fire for a young actor to start off on Dark Shadows, I'll tell you that.
We were forced to be better because it was so different. It was so new. Nobody said, "Oh, what are you doing? This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen on television." But everyone had a gentle feeling about it. The world has changed. The business has changed so much. This was wonderful. And if I can use 90s terms for it, we were on the cutting edge of something that it was only hinted at. And it's very fun to be in a place like that. It's very, very exciting to go and do something where you knew that everyone around you was also saying, well, they're not doing this on As the World Turns.
On camera, I can tell you that humorously, Johnny Carlin and I had some wonderful, wonderful moments together, particularly in the early times when I was chained in the basement. If anybody remembers that particular scene with the chicken leg, where John was tantalizing me with, Willie, that is, tantalized me with that chicken leg, and we just had such a wonderful time with that. And there were other moments like that that happened, oh God. And the other thing that I found extremely humorous about doing the show was the fact that since in those days and the budget was such that this was a one-take show. That is, if you didn't do it the first time, it was too bad, because that's what went on the air. And not only were there occasions when actors had difficulty with lines and somebody else had to cover for them, and that was always panic time, but it was fun. It was really challenging to do it this way because you knew you had no other choice. This was it. The camera's rolling, go.
Barnabas! You know what to do, you know what to do now, Julia. Go, please, hurry. Stay here, Dr. Hoffman. You do not touch Julia. Now go.
There were occasions when the sets would start rattling. There were also occasions when I can recall that there was a show when one of the grips was visible on camera. I think he had his pants half down or something. He was straightening his pants.
Just gives me the willies even being here.
Gives me the willies. That's funny.
In reality, it was a very small stage. We could only fit 4 sets on it, and that was false. 4 small sets. I mean, the drawing room set was, which everybody remembers when they saw it as a kid. They thought it was huge. It was a joke, The Great Stairway was not far from great, and all the other sets were little sets, and you'd have to pull one out, put another one in, and we used 3 cameras, and it was a lunatic asylum. Guys were racing up and didn't have enough room in the studio to get the cameras by each other, and it was, oh, jeez, it was a madhouse. It was fun, though. Oh, you always remember the odd things that happened. It was, basically it was live television. Even though it was tape, it wasn't. You couldn't repeat, you couldn't stop. You got tape machines for half an hour a day, and that was it. And you rolled in your commercials, you rolled in everything, and at the end of that half hour was a complete show. So although it was tape, it didn't make any difference. There was no stopping, so it was live television. So a lot of very strange things happen, you know, some wonderful moments.
I expect you wonder what I'm doing here, right?
No, I'm glad you're here. I need company.
It's hard to tell somebody what Dark Shadows is. It was a good time. It was really a good time. It was a great learning ground. And God knows it wasn't highly compensated, so we, you know, we weren't there for any other reason than to mostly to learn and to expand and to, it was steady. And it was fun.
It felt like doing theater. It felt like doing summer stock because it was so under-rehearsed. We'd only rehearsed it that one day. We'd only actually run the show 4 or 5 times. And it felt very much like live summer stock. But it was fun, lots of fun. It was a great challenge. It had an energy that I don't think soap operas have today for that reason, because the actors know if they make a mistake, they can stop and start over.
Who are you, Mr. Stiles? I mean, I know you don't live here.
I'm a friend of Quentin's. I live at Rose Cottage. I'm terribly sorry if I've disturbed you. Please forgive me.
The technical, you know, quality of Dark Shadows was really ahead of its time. In fact, when we had our conference, the reunion a couple of years back, I remember watching scenes that I had done. And some of the things is transposing the head in the box and talking and all of those things that are, you know, are taken for granted now, but back then it was quite an innovative way of doing things. And, you know, you don't see that a lot on soaps today. You don't see that kind of, but of course then there are not many shows like Dark Shadows.
The only thing that I think all of us resented in our perfectly justified way was that they spent so much time with setting up a special effect, a chroma key effect, or this or that, that we didn't, the usual time that the actors had to rehearse the lines with each other in the set was, we were sort of in the corner, and some of us finally said, well, this is no good, we're going to have to go back up to the dressing room and until they call us and go over these lines, and we'll never get them. But that was the only thing. But it was fun to see your head be removed from your shoulder and all of the things that they did. Yeah.
I only did it with the thought of making some money to go west, and I thought, well, it's not going to last. I knew the show was on probation or whatever the word is, and but then when it picked up, and I guess I went along with it. I mean, why leave a thing that's going for whatever reasons? But I couldn't understand it. I remember Dan coming to me one day with a handful of mail, and I looked to see who he was giving it to. You know, and I thought every day was coming to can me. And there he came with this mail. Well, that went from a handful to 5,000 letters a week.
It's a great show to work with. Get a chance to write a lot of terrific music. That's not a pat on the back. I mean, various styles of music. A great chance to use an orchestra and do all kinds of interesting things.
Shadows of the night, falling silently. Echo of the past, calling you to me.
Quentin's Theme was interesting because Quentin's Theme is the biggest show, the biggest song that's ever come out of daytime television, one of the only 2 or 3 hits, and one of the biggest songs that's ever come out of television. Quentin's Theme was in the Cashbox charts #5 and #2 in easy listening, which, you know, for a song like this is just incredible. And people are, again, you know, people are always asking me, gee, how did you happen to write Quentin's Theme? I might add, by the way, that Broadcast Music Incorporated has just given me a certificate acknowledging the fact that Quentin's theme just went over 1 million radio performances, and I'm very, very proud of that. It was more than just a hit when the show was on. It's obviously been a standard, and that's very thrilling to me.
Don't be mad, Quentin. It's just that I don't want to play the game anymore. Neither does Amy. Please, Quentin, don't be mad. Please. No, Quentin. Please. Please.
I don't know whether that was, I don't recall whether it was planned or whether or not it was just something that, you know, we'd been on for a couple of weeks and without any voice, you know, without any dialogue. And they got some reaction to it and they decided to extend it a little while. And of course, the more you extend a thing like that, the more the suspense builds up and that kind of thing. And then you wonder, well, what's this character going to sound like when he finally, it's be like the days of talking pictures, you know, some actors couldn't make the transition from silent to talkies. So this might have been an actor that couldn't. You see, once Quentin opened his mouth and began to talk, you would have said, oh, he was better off silent. So then they would play the music. Each time he would come on, you know, you would hear this music. And then finally he did speak, and on we went from there. But it did build up some sort of suspense, I think, for the character.
Are you beginning to doubt my powers? No, I just think you pushed them a bit far, huh? How quickly men forget. Take your hands away from your face, you fool. Where's the blood? Look! Hey. This could be you.
I used to devise ways of trying to get home after we'd shoot at the studio, you know, because there'd always be some children or people waiting outside the studios. And if you were in a particular hurry or whatever and had to get somewhere at home, you knew that you couldn't go out the front door. And there was this back door at the 53rd Street studio, and sometimes you could get out that way, but generally you just go out and say hello to everybody. That was all right. Fun.
The fans were always wonderful. I mean, we had a little studio at 53rd Street, and it was like our home. That was so wonderful. We had this winding staircase that you came from after your dressing, you know, from your dressing room down to the studio. So it really got you in the mood because you were going down this strange little staircase. And so it was, the whole building was ours. And outside, these kids, people would be waiting for us from early morning. When we arrived there at 8 o'clock, they'd be there. Marie Wallace or Jonathan, oh, hi, how are you? Wonderful. And be there during the day and often there when we left at 4 o'clock. Immediately someone came up to me, I think after my first show. Can we be your fan club? Can we run your fan club? I'd like to be the president. I mean, it was wonderful. You were embraced immediately. There's no other show like that. There never has been.
I think it's time that you and I had a little talk.
Yes. I think I'll like talking to you, Nicholas.
Oh? Why?
Because you're not like he is.
Adam?
Yes.
What's the matter with him?
I can't bear the sight of him. He's ugly, he's boring, he's stupid.
Sorry you feel that way.
I don't feel that way about you. You're different.
How am I different?
You're intelligent, exciting, charming. You're my kind of man.
I was surprised every day coming out and finding young school children standing outside waiting to say hello and have autographs signed and talk about what's important in their life and what they're struggling with, and to go into restaurants or in Central Park, which I love doing, bike riding, roller skating, and to have some young person screaming, Beth, Beth, coming across the place, or meeting someone in the subway who recognized the show. It amazed me.
I never had a chance, for example, to be aware of my popularity And when I was, like, when I'd be sent out on these hype tours around the country, you know, with supermarkets, and they'd have 2,000 or 3,000 screaming people, you know. It was like the Beatles. It was very much the same kind of thing. And I thought, this is ridiculous. But anyway, I used to love sending them up. You know, I never played their image. I just screamed back at them, you know, or something. I was always sending it up and having fun with it.
I would be at the neighborhood pool, public pool, and people would go, you're, and I'd go, no, I'm not. Who? I don't know. They would recognize me, and I would get feedback that way. But other than that, I had absolutely no idea. And even now it amazes me, 20 years later, that there are this many people that are interested in and fans.
I guess I am surprised, but it's nice to think that people have such imagination. I always thought that was the great thing about the show, is that it really fed people's imagination. And it was very unusual in that era, which was daytime television was pretty bland and all sort of kitchen-oriented.
I would say that Dan Curtis chose, you know, it was a very exciting thing to be chosen by him, and he really believed in us. And we got to do extraordinary things, things that most people don't get to do in a lifetime. We got to experience. I loved it when, you know, my boyfriend, at the stroke of 12, on his birthday, turned into a werewolf. I mean, you know, how could you ask for more? You know, really, it was a major treat. I'm amazed at the continued interest in this. It's just phenomenal. I mean, I feel that we've sort of all grown up with our fans. It's like we've all become a family. My friends from the show, I mean, people that I know from the show and I've worked with, Johnny Carlin and David Selby, all these people. I mean, I feel like we're sort of brothers and sisters now. You see one and I say, hi, David, you know, or hi, John. It's just an amazing thing. I think, and I also feel that with the fans have become friends.
Fans are very special people. If they continue to remember you, or look at you, or say hello, or write you a letter, because you gave them something that was charming or amusing or pleasurable at all, and they can remember it and think it's delightful. I can't imagine a better relationship. I really can't. They are loving, and in turn, by all of the people that I still talk to from the show, are loved. It's something I cannot, people I can't applaud enough, and thanks for remembering.
It's such a wonderful feeling to be on stage and feel your love and admiration.
They started having conventions, and we started to see each other again, and it's amazing how wonderful it is to see all these people at the conventions that we worked with so long ago, see how their lives have changed and kind of swap stories.
I was going from Jeb Hawkes to Cyrus Longworth, and there had to be a huge difference with the characters, and I hadn't done much character acting until then. And I remember Leela Swift saying, okay, Chris, your Cyrus is still just like Jeb. I mean, there's no difference. You've got to come up with something. Now, come on, come on. That was just before dress rehearsal. Then dress rehearsal, I tried to change myself and change my voice and change my walk.
The moment I remember most was, of course, when I came back and I got a new show called Company, and they had to kill Amanda Harris off. Well, it was quite extravagant in that I was on this bridge, and I was running, and David Selby was reaching for me saying, come on, and there was this little break in the bridge, and I had to jump over, and I was frightened, and there were all these boulders and rocks, and then, well, she was killed in this avalanche. Well, in dress rehearsal, I had the costume on, and I had the wig, and I put a plastic bag over my head, as they instructed me, to protect myself from the stagehands that had a canvas bag and that they would release, and as the styrofoam rocks would fall down on me, they would drop some peat moss to give it that realistic effect. A little later, when we really filmed it, the same thing, but without the plastic bag. But they didn't tell me that they were going to put maybe 10 times more peat moss in it. So there I was, and it was realistic. Now this stuff came down. I was like trying to scream and be effective, and it was in my mouth, in my nose, in my eyes, everywhere. And there I was. But of course, that was my last scene. And knowing the technique, that they had to move to the next set right away because the next line is out. They all left, the lights went out, and there I was sitting like this. And that was my swan song.
At last I am in his house. I must be very careful. He does not know how near death is.
And she started out a ghost, and then she was brought back from the dead. But for the first 6 months, it was lucky I didn't have to talk because I was too terrified to speak anyway. But I beckoned. I mean, I could really beckon. I'd beckon, and then someone terrible would come and take me away, and we'd go to a different time period, and it was really a lot of fun.
Funniest moment on a show is one that I remember with David Hennessy when we were doing the first Dark Shadows movie. And everyone is supposed to be paid the same amount of money. It was called the Most Favored Nations contract. Everyone with the exception, I believe, of Joan Bennett and John Frid. David heard the idea somehow that someone was getting paid more than he was. So he went into the client's room, and I was sitting in there, and he called Dan Curtis. And the conversation went something like, Dan, listen, so-and-so's getting more money, I hear, than I am. Dan, I don't need this, but I can always go back to high school. I fell down roaring. I heard that line.
Barnabas Collins, vampire, takes a bride in a bizarre act of unnatural love. Come and see how the vampires do it. House of Dark Shadows. Nobody lives there.
The first film was a tremendous success. I don't really know about the second film, whether the second film was a success or not, but certainly the first film was a success because they wanted to make another one. They didn't make another one after the second one, so that might tell you something, I don't know. But the first film was a lot of fun, that's all. All the old characters were in it, and we had a good time shooting upstate New York, 30 miles from the Big Apple, and that was fun.
Angelique Collins is dead. Now she will take her revenge.
No!
From the makers of House of Dark Shadows. Night of Dark Shadows. Just another night of terror.
It's a beautiful gift, Barnabas.
I was going to give it to you as a wedding present. But I want you to keep it as a constant reminder that I'll be with you again very soon.
My boyfriend on this show, Joe Haskell, I think could have been my boyfriend in real life. I just loved Joel Crothers. He was a couple of years older than me, and he was so handsome, and he was very funny, and I just loved the guy. I think it was appropriate for Dark Shadows, which was full of larger-than-life characters, to have actors who were larger than life. And among them we had Thayer David, who must have played 12 roles on that show, and of course Grayson Hall, who is probably the most eccentric of any of them, with that wonderful voice, that raucous voice of hers, and to play everything from Julia Hoffman to Magda, and with great verve and energy and humor. Grayson could always laugh at herself and make everybody around her just feel good. She's a great lady.
Magda, show me what's in that box.
Yes, Barnabas. Now is the time.
Is Dark Shadows still full of vampires and witches and other scary things?
And werewolves and ghosts and ghouls.
What is the toughest thing about doing a show like that from your point of view?
Learning
Having been in
lines.
pictures, really?
Learning lines so constantly, you know, so many.
Do you cheat a little? Do you kind of?
No, I don't, because I'm
You don't?
nearsighted. I can't see
Oh,
the
you can't see the
teleprompter.
cards.
And I think they engage all of us by our eyesight, because most everybody is nearsighted on the show. Therefore, we can't read the teleprompter.
How do you? Were you always a quick study, or?
Yes.
I see. Well, that's
Fortunately.
very fortunate.
Yeah.
For people
Because
who
it
aren't.
is a lot of learning. I almost can't remember when you weren't here. Oh, yes, I can. I remember David. He was so much more difficult then than he is now. You've made an enormous change in him, Vicki. We're all going to miss you very much.
Don't think that. Now that I've found you all, I'm not going to disappear. Collinwood will always mean home to me.
When I first met Joan, I was absolutely in awe of her as being a movie star. And then I was very impressed with her professionalism. She was always prompt, always prepared, and at the same time she was very accessible. And now when I think of her, I always think of her laughing. But more and more, I admire her.
I can see what it is now that, I mean, as crazy and as naive as the whole thing was, I could see what it was that had the audience fascinated. It was a very enchanting quality to it.
I thank everyone. I thank them for watching 25 years ago, which is a long time ago. I thank them for being so loving when I encounter them today. This is a wonderful thing to me and somewhat surprising.
I look back at it, mainly people, the people I met on the show, the wonderful people I met on the show, and the fun, the absolute fun of playing Willie Loomis. It was a good time. It really was a good time.
I don't think there's anything else like Dark Shadows. It's got the romance and the excitement and the mystery. It's got wonderful stories. I think it's got everything that intrigues people. It's pure escapism.
No show is perfect. No one is perfect. But it was a good company of players, and I think that we had professional fondness, and in some cases more than professional fondness for each other. I think we got the job done, which is probably the best tribute we can pay to ourselves.
Now I look back and I realize it was a wonderful job. The people, all the other actors on the show, the directors, we were a real family. People say that when they do shows for a long time, and it's really true. When a group of people get together and make something together, you all grow to be very fond of one another. And it was very exciting, the sets and the costumes, and the stories were really a lot of fun. I mean, a lot of what I've done since pales in comparison. It's so ordinary compared to Dark Shadows, which was always a surprise to us as well as to the audience.
Every once in a while, it coalesced into something quite unique in television, and I think it was really positively beautiful. I mean, there was the scripts were good. I mean, this would happen within an episode. There'd be a good scene, the actors worked well together, cameras didn't cross cameras, we didn't see the edges of sets, and so forth and so on. It was just a good-looking show, and good actors doing well-written lines.
I have absolutely fond memories of Dark Shadows. We had a great time, and I loved all of those people. And we were like a big family, and it was a lot of fun, and we were trailblazers in those days. We were coming up off the floor. We gave ABC a daytime schedule. The days of the strikes, and people would try and strike us and not strike anybody else, and we crossed the picket lines and did all those things, you know, and it was at a point in life where everybody saw this as the beginning for them, the launching pad to great things and big careers, and it was great fun.
The last one, Dark Shadows, VTR 32471, air 4271. 4271. Number 70, take one.
What's happened? Melanie! I found her lying in the woods. Melanie, what's happened? Bring her in to put her on the sofa. Melanie, are you all right?
Must have been attacked by something.
Some kind of wild animal.
Look!
Get the doctor.
Yes, ma'am.
What? Melanie! What is it? What caused them? Tell me. What could have happened? What kind of an animal would attack her like that?
If I didn't know better. Yes, Stokes? If I didn't know it wasn't possible, I'd swear there was a vampire at Collingwood.
Oh, no, please!
Stay away from me!
No. No! No, Megan, please, no!
What are you?
Dark Shadows is a Dan Curtis production.
As a result of your thousands of letters requesting a later time period for Dark Shadows, the program will be seen 1/2 hour later, beginning July 15th over most of these ABC stations. Consult your advance listings for the time in your area.
Hi, I'm Laura Parker.
And I'm Catherine Lee Scott, although you probably know us best as Josette
And Angelique from Dark Shadows.
You know, it's hard to believe that it's been over 25 years since we first did Dark Shadows.
And we're pleased to announce that due to your undying interest, the Dark Shadows Companion is now available in a special audio cassette edition.
It's narrated by Laura and Jonathan Frid, Roger Davis, and myself. The Dark Shadows Companion audiobook features a complete history of Dark Shadows, along with Robert Cobert's original soundtrack music.
To order either the Dark Shadows Companion softcover book or the audio cassettes, please write to the following address.